About 150 years ago, humanity discovered evolution. Before that, there was a presumption that reality was static, life was static, the universe was a static place. That it just simply was the way it had always been. And there was a discovery that the cosmos is part of a developmental process, that life is part of a developmental process, that culture is part of a developmental process. There was this dramatic discovery that life, including the whole universe that it existed within, is moving. That the whole universe is moving. Where there was the discovery that reality is moving. Manifest reality is a creative process that's moving. It's like it's like suddenly waking up and finding yourself on a moving train. Think, oh, whoa. The train is moving and it's going somewhere. So in this teaching, this is the other face of God, or this absolute principle, is the discovery or the recognition that life, as the cosmos and everything that exists within it, is moving. There's a fundamental movement. The cosmos is a moving train, and it seems to be moving towards greater potential, greater complexity, greater potential. But the important thing to understand is it was suddenly just recognized that the whole universe is moving. We didn't know that before, so it's a very recent discovery. So then if you say, well, what is the source of this movement? From a spiritual point of view, where's the movement coming from? Why is the universe moving? So there are physical explanation, or some people have come up with physical, non-metaphysical explanations as to why the universe is moving, as to why the life evolves, and why consciousness and culture are moving. But the spiritually minded realizers began to intuit that there is a primary force, or a creative force in the cosmos, that as manifest beings that we experience this movement, that we're part of that movement, we're all an expression of it. And that movement is the God principle, is the God principle as the creator God, creating form, matter, life, energy, consciousness, cognition. One writer said there was not one Big Bang, but three Big Bangs. The first Big Bang was the leap from nothingness, emptiness, to matter and energy. The second Big Bang was the emergence of life. And the third Big Bang was the emergence of mind. And when you see that matter and energy created the conditions that made it possible for life to emerge, and the emergence of life over a very long period of time created the conditions that made it possible for mind to emerge, you start to realize that something's happening here. That there seems to be, may I say, intelligence guiding this process and driving it. Lower levels of emerging complexity are creating the conditions for higher levels of emerging complexity, which are creating the conditions for even higher levels of emerging complexity. And then, lo and behold, we find ourselves in the midst of this process. But what's important to understand in this larger understanding of non-duality, that in terms of the nature of the absolute principle, the nature of the absolute principle is non-existence, emptiness, formless, voidness. But there's no coming and there's no going, there's no birth and there's no death. There's no creation and there's no destruction. Is God as the absolute principle called being. And the nature of God, or the absolute principle, as becoming, has a paradoxically completely different expression, which is to create matter and energy, life, mind, and consciousness. And it's moving, baby, it's moving, it's moving. Can you feel the trains moving? The train, we're on a moving train. We are the moving train, and we're the moving train. We are the moving train, and we're on the moving train. And we're going somewhere. And where we're going has to do with the emergence of these levels of complexity. If you look at how we've gotten to where we are now, you say, oh, this is very fascinating. I see where I've come from. I begin to understand where I've come from as a manifest expression of reality. See, this is manifest. See the physical form? You've got one too. This is manifest. This is a relative emergence that exists in time and space as form and energy, consciousness and cognition. This is emerged. We've all got one for a while. But this is manifest reality. You are manifest. You are a manifestation of this cosmic process that's unfolding as all of us. It's a huge process that's happening right now, and most of us are not aware of the enormity of the process itself. But my understanding of cosmic consciousness is to become consciously aware of the enormity of the process that we're all part and parcel of. And that process is going somewhere, it's moving, it's moving, it's moving, it's moving, it's moving, it's reaching. It's not static. It's not static. So the revelation of the totality of reality is not just isness, but it's also, I don't know what it is, I don't know what to call it. But the reason this is important is not because it's so, but if it is true, if it is part of the ultimate truth about who you are, if it's a part of the ultimate truth about how we are, that means it's you. It's your business. Now, what people believe is that, what people say is that evolution up until very recent, before the complex human brain emerged, before culture was born, that this evolutionary process was driven by unconscious forces. There was mind and intelligence at work, obviously there was mind and intelligence at work, but it wasn't self-aware. So what people say is that now that highly human complex consciousness and the capacity for self-reflective awareness has emerged in the system, where this process is going is no longer going to be directed by the energy and intelligence that brought it to this point. It seems to be up to human beings at this point to get into the driver's seat. Because theoretically we become conscious enough to take control of the process and to guide it. It seems in many ways we're doing a great job, and in more ways we're doing a terrible job. But that's not the point of this talk. The point of the talk is, if what I'm saying is true, and I believe it is true, when you transcend your ego in the context of evolution, it means there's an enormous responsibility that's staring you right in the face, which means, what are you doing about your responsibility to, in your own imperfect but important way, taking responsibility for where this train is moving? Because the ego is always only concerned about its own needs, its own wants, its own desires, its own fears, its own pain, its own longing, which are always relative. They're always relative, and they're always very pedestrian compared to cosmic consciousness and this cosmic aspiration of the universe. That when you wake up enough, just as we realize with the being enlightenment, I am that, as they say in Vedanta, I am that, I am the one I in the whole universe. I am that. When you wake up to the I am that in the evolutionary context, then you realize, as I always repeat, I am, I am the energy and intelligence that created the universe, and is creating the universe, awakening to itself in and through the form of the body, mind, and personality of myself, which is true. Who could deny it? But our puny little selfish egos don't want to bear the unbearable implications of what that means. It means if that's true, I can no longer live an ego-based, selfish life. I have to take up responsibility for who I really am as the creator of the universe. And what I always like to remind people in terms of trying to understand what non-duality means, which is so difficult to understand, I always like to repeat this because it's kind of fun. But in Vedanta they say, I am that. And then I ask people, do you believe that? People say, oh yes, I believe that. I said, so in an evolutionary context, it means you are the only one that could have been to choose to create the whole universe. And then I said, that means this is all your responsibility, which is kind of funny. And people get scared. Because from a perspective, this is interesting because from a perspective of non-duality, incomprehensible non-duality, the mystery of non-duality, it's true from an absolute perspective, but from a relative perspective, you're just a unique individual human being doing your best to struggle through the challenges of life in a complex world. So from the perspective of non-duality, it's absolutely true that you are the one who created the universe, which means it's your responsibility. But from a relative point of view, it means you're only able to take partial responsibility for what you're true, for the whole process. And it's holding this kind of paradox between these two, which is a big part of what living an evolutionarily awake and spiritual life is all about, is holding the paradox. But some people can hold the paradox with great passion and power, and some people can hold it just as a thought. But the obligation in awakening to evolution is taking responsibility for where we are all going. Because it seems that when we wake up, we begin to recognize that God has now left it in our hands. I am the energy and intelligence that created the universe, awakening to itself through the body, mind, personality of Andrew, or each and every one of us. It seems that God has taken it as far as she could, and now she needs conscious, sentient beings with the capacity for self-reflective awareness that have the capacity to take responsibility for where her and his cosmic experiment is actually going. Now the ego cannot bear this kind of information. It's just unbearable. It's uncontainable. It's crushing. It's frightening, it's overwhelming, and it's self-implicating in a way that is absolutely horrible. But who could deny the truth of it from a perspective of non-duality? So the non-dual truth here is absolute. The absolute truth is ungraspable by the mind. And the minute we look at this in relative terms, we lose the point. Because from a relative point of view, we all have excuses. We all have reasons why I could not possibly be ready for this. But the thing is, what you want to do to be reasonable about this, you want to be able to hold the evolutionary tension without being crushed by it. Allow it to awaken you and to inspire you and to empower you without becoming overwhelmed, and also without becoming a crazy egomaniac also. Can happen. So non-duality from the perspective of being, the being non-duality is, what that means for you is having nothing, knowing nothing, and being no one, which we practice prior to the meditation, engaging in the meditative process, return to being, having nothing, knowing nothing, and being no one, letting go of everything, awaken to eternal consciousness. There's no responsibility involved except unconditional freedom. So you're trying to awaken to and allow unconditional freedom to overwhelm you, which in evolutionary enlightenment is the foundation of evolutionary enlightenment. And in evolutionary enlightenment, we use both of these truths are equally valid. They're both absolutes, they're both absolutely true and equal. In this teaching, we look at them as the two faces of God or two faces of the Absolute. So the experience of God as being is peace. What does God feel like? As being, God feels like peace. Having nothing, knowing nothing, and being no one. Zero, emptiness, eternal freedom, unimaginable absolute freedom. I am one without a second, never born and never die. It's a source of the revelation of eternity. So we want that to be, in this teaching, the foundation, the perennial and traditional foundation for enlightenment. And we want to practice, I call this the traditional enlightenment. We want to practice this every day, contemplate this absolute truth every single day, and as building our own foundation of freedom. Because we want to gain access to this knowledge of the eternal nature of our true self. Have access to the eternal nature of our true self on a regular basis, so we'll be spiritually vibrant, spiritually strong, and not terrified of change. But we have to do the work, because it's a living experience if you work hard enough to awaken to it. And we can have these revelations, they can last for a short time, then they disappear. So if we realize this is absolutely true, we want to work on it. But the point I'm trying to make is, in evolutionary enlightenment, traditional enlightenment is the foundation. It's a 3,000-year-old lineage. And upon the foundation of eternity consciousness, we want to strive to awaken to cosmic consciousness, or the consciousness of evolution. So what does evolution feel like? It feels like ecstatic urgency. What does God feel? What does the Creator God feel like? The Creator God feels very urgent about his and her creative process. How do I know? Because as many of you have heard me describe these three signs or proof, positive or examples of the evolutionary impulse. What does God feel like as the Creator? God feels like the urge to, the biological urge to create new life. Evolution feels like reaching towards that which is new, that which has never existed before. This is what I was saying yesterday when I was speaking to Paul, I think. If you were God and you created the universe, would you be more interested in what you had already created? Or would you be more interested in what you had not created yet? There would be an eternal curiosity about what's possible now, and what's possible now, and what's possible now. So it's the newness, it's the emergence of something that is new and untouched by time and history. It's the thrill of the eternal thrill of the newness. That's what I believe. God is the evolutionary impulse of the Creator. God is fascinated by, compelled by that which is eternally new and fresh. So, from the creative side of this picture, it's not that every moment is new and fresh, as in the being consciousness, the eternal nature of the present moment. This is we're focused on the newness of emergent potential. So it's literally when something materially, or on more subtle levels, even of thought, emerges that have never existed before. That's what the God principle in all of us is fascinated by, compelled by. And we all feel it at different times, but we don't know it. So when the urge towards procreation, which is a sexual impulse, feels like ecstatic urgency, and that's the ecstatic urgency we feel at a biological level about creating new life. The ecstasy of lovemaking creates the conditions that makes it possible for a new life to emerge. What does the sexual impulse feel like? Ecstatic urgency, right? Ecstasy and urgency, right? So there seems to be a relationship between the creative process, which we look at a gross biological level, and the experience of overwhelming urgency, ecstasy and urgency. It's a unique combination. This has to happen, it must happen, it needs to happen quickly now. That's what it feels like, right? It doesn't need to feel that way, but it does. So we know that the evolutionary impulse is the experience of ecstatic urgency as a biological vibration in the act of procreation. So then the second level is the human beings are the only form of life on this planet that are compelled, for better and for worse, these days for worse, to innovate, and to create and to innovate. So we're driven to innovate, to create that which is new. And the innovative process was happening very slowly for hundreds of thousands of years. Now it's speeding up, and it's become exponential. It's speeding up and speeding up and speeding up. And we're probably going to destroy ourselves because of it. But the drive is an ecstatic compulsion, is an ecstatic urgency. It's intoxicating, the ecstatic urgency of the creative principle, for better and for worse. There's no inherent moral principle laid into this process. It's a purely impersonal drive, a creative drive in the cosmos. And there's no inherent moral ground built into it. That's what we have to bring to it. But it's a creative drive, and the experience of that creative drive, for better and for worse, is ecstatic urgency towards that which is new. This has given rise to beauty and also to horror. Both. Still is. But the best part of this creative process or creative principle for spiritually minded people is the awareness that the universe seems to be striving to become more conscious through the vibration and the pulsation of the spiritual impulse, which is the urge towards consciousness. So the urge towards consciousness is a real thing. Some people feel, I have to become more conscious, I must become more conscious, I have to do it. It's felt like a compulsion. Other people never experience it. But some people are spiritually compelled towards consciousness. The greatest realizers were supremely compelled towards consciousness. They had to do it. Something was forcing them. And that's the evolutionary impulse manifesting itself at the highest level, the high level of consciousness itself. So this movement happens at the gross level, gross biological level, the level of mind and creativity, and the level of consciousness itself. So then it seems that the energy and intelligence that created the universe, which is the God principle, seems to be trying to become more conscious through you and through you. That's non-duality. If you understand it, it's important. Because we're talking about what's the meaning of non-duality. So Andrew, you're saying that the universe, that the creative energy in the universe is trying to evolve and become more conscious through me. I say, yes, when you feel that compulsion towards consciousness, is that personal to you alone? From the context of non-duality, you say it's the energy and intelligence that created the universe trying to become more conscious through you. Something's trying to happen through you. It's not you. The body, mind, and personality are just a vehicle through which this force works. We're all just vehicles. Everybody thinks this is about, in our egoic mindedness, we think this life is about my experience. But the creator of the universe doesn't care about your experience. He or she has her own plans or hopes. Seems, we could say. I am the energy and intelligence that created the universe and is creating the universe awakening to itself through the body, mind, and personality of your own self. Say, really? So when you experience the spiritual impulse pushing you forward, telling you it's not enough, there's farther to go. It's not enough, there's farther to go. Reach higher, reach higher, reach higher. It's not you. It's the God principle itself, striving for greater consciousness, access to greater consciousness through you. But it's not that I'm saying I'm speaking metaphorically now. It's not to say that the God principle is not absolute. Inconceivable. I don't even know what that means for consciousness at that level. Whatever that means to be absolute, I can't even imagine it. But it means we, through this form, through this manifest form, have a long way to go to get anywhere near where she is. You follow? And she's pushing. I'm speculating here, but but she's pushing us. She's driving us for more because she wants us to meet her. It's metaphorical. It's not literally true, but it helps us understand what you experience when you experience the spiritual drive that's compelling you towards higher potential, That's what it is. It's God herself at work. It's not you. So you remember before I said consciousness delights in its own self-recognition. There's something going on here at this subtle level of consciousness itself that's very mysterious, and you can't put your hands on it. So what happens is when you cooperate, when you respond to this principle, and she responds back. Now, in light of the current meta crisis we're all facing, you can see we're not doing very well at the moment. We seem to have been very busy with innovation and emerging complexity, but not in a holistic form. So in evolutionary enlightenment, God is both being and becoming. In evolutionary enlightenment, God, the absolute principle, is both being and becoming. Being is absolute, non-dual. Being is absolute, full and complete. When you awaken to being, you awaken to perfection. The only way you can experience perfection and know what perfection is to awaken to the unborn, the uncreated, the deathless. When you awaken to that which is birthless and deathless, timeless and formless and eternal, you become aware of that which is perfect. You experience perfection, you know what it is. It's not you, it's the state of consciousness is perfect. The ground of reality, you experience its perfection. And you know when you experience that level of perfection, you know what God is. And once you've experienced perfection, it becomes your touchstone. You'll never forget it. I've known that which is perfect, and that becomes your God, your North Star. So becoming is also absolute. It's an absolute impulse. It's not a relative impulse. It's an absolute impulse that I was explaining yesterday. It comes from the ground of being. The ground of being is an absolute, non-dual domain of reality. This creative impulse emerged from the womb of creation. The source of the creative impulse is absolute, which makes it absolute also. So it's an absolute intention to exist in form as form. It's my metaphysical interpretation is that it's God's desire, this is a metaphysical speculation, that it's the absolute's desire to manifest in form, through form, as herself, which is an ongoing process. It's not a static process, it's an ongoing process. So this is when it gets very interesting. This is what we were talking about yesterday. Because it's an ongoing process, this is why Ken Wilber said, form is emptiness, as the Buddha said in the Heart Sutra, form is emptiness and emptiness is form. And now we've recognized that the world of form is evolving, which means the world of form is the manifestation of God. That God is evolving through form. So when you realize that the absolute principle, the God principle, is moving, and we are part of that movement, and in some small but not totally insignificant way, our relationship to that movement is an expression of what the God principle is also. It gets fascinating and complex and interesting, completely overwhelming, and really begins to command all of our attention. Look at this, understand this, embrace this, take responsibility for this. This is everything. This means everything. God herself, as a manifest being, or as a manifest potential, is not finished. And this is what's very difficult for people to understand, because whatever notions of God people have, she or he has to be static and done, resolved, absolute perfect. But she is resolved and done, absolute perfect, and she's not resolved and not done. She's always perfect, even in her ever-changing nature. And what does that mean, that God could be ever-changing? These are basically new insights about the ultimate nature of reality. So you have to let these things really sink in and blow your mind. And then have the courage to embrace it. So you're saying, so God herself, in her manifest form, is growing and becoming more of who and what she can be through the process of manifestation. Yes. Yes, isn't that amazing? For better and for worse. on this planet, we've made some bad decisions. So she's not there to guarantee what the outcome's going to be. Remember, this creative process is impersonal. It's a force of nature. It's not a morally conditioned sentient being. It's a dynamic force. It's a force of Eros, the energy of Eros, of Eros itself. So we need to harness that energy and then guide it. It seems. Now, what's interesting about this predicament, this understanding of non-duality, is that the hard part is the realization that being and becoming are one and not two. That's the highest. It's very difficult to cognize this. But from the perspective of being and becoming, form is emptiness and emptiness is form. So because form is emptiness and emptiness is form, they're one and not two. Which means the evolutionary impulse, principle, force in the universe, is not separate from emptiness. And in this teaching, what the goal is to become, is to learn how to gain access to the ground of being as a direct experience of non-being, non-existence, letting go of everything, unconditionally, radically, absolutely, and completely, to experience the unconditional freedom of non-existence. There's no desire, there's no fear, there's no interest in movement. All I want to do is be still. I don't want to move. I never want to move. I never want to go back. I never want to come back. I want to I want to rest in this perfectly liberated state of equanimity and unconditional freedom. Right? That's one side of it. And the other is this absolute commitment to take responsibility for being the creator of the universe, which you already are anyway. What a paradox, baby. Woo! This is a paradox that will completely tear you apart, but they're both true. They're both absolutely true from the perspective of non-duality. See it. In your mind, it's very confusing for the mind. So, whoa. But you'll be able to handle it if you embrace the principle of this teaching, which is that we embrace both. So I always begin with being, and we always return to being. It's the foundation of awakening to evolution. We don't begin with evolution. We don't end with evolution. We begin with being and end with being. So the foundation here is the liberation of non-existence. From there we enter into it, and then we consciously embrace the evolutionary principle, the evolutionary process. Ideally, at least theoretically, from a point of liberation. Because you're here anyway, right? A lot of the Vedantic schools or the Advaita schools, which are so good at the being teachings, they don't know what to do with the issue of being a sentient being who's alive and has choices. What should I do? Where should I go? Why should I do anything? What must I do? How do I get out of here as soon as possible? So the evolutionary teachings answer the question of the why of existence. They answer the question of the why of existence. They answer the biggest existential questions that there is. If you realize that you're the creator of the universe, you know why you're here. It's not an accident. You did it, baby. I didn't ask to be born. That's the millennial response. I didn't ask to be born. No, the evolutionary dharma doesn't allow you to say such stupid, idiotic things. But it overwhelms you with a burden that you really can't possibly live up to. But you can try. None of us can possibly live up to the burden of responsibility authentically. I mean, we can't. It's just not possible. But we can try. And if you try with all your heart, that's good enough. But if you try with all your heart and you mean it, God would love you for it. So it's this balancing between relative and absolute that I've been working with quite a bit. We want to embrace an absolute context and allow ourselves to be overwhelmed by it. And then learn how to be reasonable. Being reasonable means we learn to embrace the limitations of being human. Because we're not gods. Even though we have the potential to be gods, we're not gods. So we can say, I know I'm not a god, but I'm gonna endeavor through spiritual training and spiritual practice to become one, even though I know I'll never get there. So then we'll always be trying a little harder to be our best. And then these miraculous expressions of this God potential, then they appear when we don't expect them to. So this definition of non-duality gives us enlightenment goals and principles to strive to live up to. So in relationship to the being, enlightenment, how free can you be? In terms of the letting go of the mind, letting go of attachment, letting go of history, being free from. The being enlightenment is about being free from. The being enlightenment is free from the body, the mind, the world. So we get to see in our spiritual practice of meditation how well we can do with being free from. It's tough. The mind and ego are attached to time and history. So being free from is easy to talk about, but it's hard to do, especially emotionally. So we get to practice being enlightened, see how free we can be in all our imperfection. It's a daily challenge. And it's the same thing with the becoming enlightenment. How authentically can we become expressions of the possible? Or are we just settling for second best? I'm a little bit too tired today. Tomorrow I'll go for what's new. Today I'm going to go for the second class one. Because you remember, the ego is very lazy. It's called inertia. So the evolutionary context is always pushing us to go farther, to realize and manifest greater potential of our own self. We all have so much creative potential inside us. Everybody does. But everybody doesn't actualize their potential because of neurosis and emotional problems. But the theoretical goal of nirvana in an evolutionary context would be one in which each and every unique individual fully manifested their evolutionary potential, their creative potential. When someone manifests their creative potential, they're happy. When we consciously or unconsciously fail to manifest our creative potential, we're sad. We're not fulfilled, right? So these are the themes that we want to work with in terms of how to live a human life, individually and together. And in this case, these absolute principles of being and becoming become the guiding principles it becomes the interpretive framework of the challenge of the human condition. This becomes the interpretive context for us. And in this case, because it's an enlightenment context, we use these absolute principles as our guides. Just like we've been speaking about over the last few days, that we can awaken to timeless, formless, beginningless, and endless eternal joy, bliss of being. And go, oh my God, I had no idea, thank you so much. 10 seconds later, huh? What was that all about? I don't know, I think I must have been falling asleep. And forget it. We've been speaking about that, as in not how ephemeral the awakening to depth is, isn't it? As quickly as we wake up, we fall back asleep, which means we forget, because higher consciousness, or the higher states of consciousness, the mind in a lower ordinary state of consciousness cannot remember. It doesn't remember, it forgets. Right? So it's the same thing about awakening to awakening to evolution. The ecstatic urgency and the excitement about what's possible is part of an awakening to evolution. It's when we awaken to evolution. You suddenly get very excited about life, being alive, all the potential there is in life. I had no idea it was so exciting to be alive. So much is possible. What a gift life is. Thank you, God, for giving me the opportunity to be a vehicle for your glory. So then people suddenly get very turned on about life, excited instead of depressed and fearful and regretful and ashamed and whatever. Suddenly they're very excited about what's possible. And in the same way, when the attention falls to other things, we can forget it. And then they forget. So the thing about these absolute contexts is they're transcendental. They don't occur in the ordinary dimension that the ego knows, experiences reality. They reveal themselves in a higher dimension, in a higher context. So the liberating thrill, the liberating excitement of the evolutionary potential, about evolutionary potential, can be as easily forgotten as the liberating potential inherent in being. Because remember, it's a kind of enlightenment. The evolutionary enlightenment means you're always excited on some level about what's possible. Did you ever hear Barbara Marx Hubbard? She was an early pioneer of evolutionary philosophy. But I remember I called her once about a year before she died, or 6 months before she died. And she'd been sleeping. And she picked up the phone and said, "Hello?" I said, "Hi, Barbara Tender." And she just started speaking, and she was in it. Because she was awake to this evolutionary principle in a very dramatic way. She wasn't awake to being. But she wasn't grounded in being, but she was awake to the evolutionary impulse and to a very rare degree. So I noticed when she answered the phone that she was an old lady, older woman, and she was sleeping. And she snapped right into it and was full of excitement. And I was like, wow. that she was authentically evolutionarily enlightened. So she was conscious of the ecstasy of the evolutionary impulse in a way that was very authentic. So it's a real thing. Evolutionary enlightenment is a real thing, distinct from being enlightenment. They look different, they sound different, they feel different. And in this teaching, we want to be able to manifest both. On an individual level and collective level, we want to manifest both. It takes work and practice. So what that would mean is that you want to cultivate the capacity to be free from and free to fully participate. Because remember, if you're damaged emotionally or psychologically or even physically too damaged, you're not available. You're busy with your pain and your suffering. So being enlightenment is free from body, mind, world, universe. You're free from all of it. And the awakening to the evolutionary impulse liberates you and gives you the energy to fully be available to participate with all of your heart, with all of your earnestness, with all of your sincerity, to fully participate, to fully engage. A lot of people are half-baked, so are you in? I don't know, I'll see. How do you feel about this? I don't know, I gotta think about it. So most people in terms of their own life are not fully committed to their own life. Everybody's playing, being very measured in their responses. And I guess for a short time we can do that when we're young, but at a certain point we got to get going, man. We don't have forever to live. So what does it mean to be fully in? What is your ego going to do then? It's going to freak out. The ego never wants to be fully in. It always wants an escape clause. So the goal with evolutionary enlightenment, or enlightenment in general, is to be fully in without an escape clause. Then then that's the real thing. So the evolutionary enlightenment part of it is what compels us, inspires us to be everything we can be and more, not for our own sake, but for the sake of the evolution of the interior of the whole cosmos. And it's really true. And if you have that inspiration and that understanding, in this enlightenment context, if it's awake to you, you'll do everything you can to make it real. I don't know any other way to be truly happy, by the way, with everybody. This is the only way I understand that we can be fully and truly happy, by embracing both of these dimensions of non-duality. So think about it. I'll go into questions in the afternoon, promise. But what I want you to do when you think about it is just I want you to understand and recognize how that this is a whole teaching. It's a whole complex, full embrace, a very historically current embrace of this full significance of non-duality means in a developmental context. There are a lot of powerfully realized people that don't embrace the evolution part, so they're denying a big part of reality. It doesn't mean they're not awake. They're awake to being, but they're not awake to becoming. So within the context of being, can I fully and unconditionally, radically, and completely let go of my mind and my history and my attachments and my fears? Very difficult. But that's the spiritual challenge of the path of being. And the gift, if you can do it, I'm not saying I can do it. I'm working on it though. Is peace. And that means your karma is burnt. That's what the ultimate meaning of that is. It means your soul has now been freed forever. That's the potential. And with becoming, it's to become a real player in the game of life, fully committed to doing everything you possibly can to give your gifts fully actualize your human potential, without reservation, without hesitation, without making excuses. Realizing that we're all imperfect works in progress, doesn't matter. But the point is, we want to give up the path of compromise. We want to that's the thing here, because for a lot of us, and I was just repeating what I said a few minutes ago, consciously or unconsciously, we prefer to compromise because it's easier than putting our life on the line and doing everything we can to become everything we can be, which is so much harder. But if we're going to live the evolutionary enlightenment with courage and conviction, it means we're going to take the risk of going all the way, knowing we're going to make mistakes, we're going to fall down, do stupid things, cause pain and suffering. It's part of being alive. It's no way to avoid it. But we're not resisting the totality of the implications of the promise, and that gives us moral authority, moral conviction. And it gives us a location within the enormity of time and space. It means we know where we are, we know why we're here. In the midst of all this confusion and complexity, we know where we're located in a way that's very spiritually empowering. So these are the gifts that are the promise of the teaching. I'm going to stop now, but the other thing to keep in mind is that the practice of enlightenment, whatever that means, is very simple. If you just get right down to it, there is surrender, which is letting go on one hand, and there's effort on the other. That's it. So if you're going to be good at this, you have to become a master at letting go when you need to let go, unconditionally, learning how to let go. Learning how to let go again and again and again and again, and ever more deeply and ever more deeply. Ever more deeply and even more deeply, because it's always farther to go. Letting go is really tough, but that's the keys to the kingdom. On one hand, and then when you need to make the right effort for the right reasons, being willing to do whatever you need to do to fight for your life, the life of your soul, to make whatever heroic effort this needs to be made to keep you from falling off a cliff. And you have to be prepared to act on these two things. To let go when you need to let go, and to make the effort you need to make when you need to make it, no matter what your ego says. Because with the enlightenment practice, the ego is never going to be on your side. It's always going to be against you. And that's what most people don't understand from my perspective. In this enlightenment process, the ego always has another agenda. It's always going to try and talk you out of it. No, that's not a good idea. I have a better plan. So learning how to renounce the voice of the ego in relationship to both of these possibilities of unconditional freedom of your soul or total self-actualization. You have to be very, very awake, aware, and alert, and courageous. And fighting a battle with the individual and collective ego that always wants to talk you out of this arrangement is a big part of the work. So don't deceive yourself. This is not easy. But the payoff is beyond imagination, and the payoff is not for you, it's for the evolutionary process as I understand it. But still so much to be proven. But when you contemplate these truths, you keep on realizing how much is possible, how much is possible, how much is possible. So much is possible. And we all fall so far short of what could be. Not that we should feel shame and guilt, but we should just realize what the task at hand is. It's enormous. So if it's about me, I'm always going to look for a way out. But if it's about the universe, where else is there to be? Could there be anything more worthwhile to do? Not really. But we have to have a big mind and a big heart and a level of seriousness. Gravity talks about life itself, about human incarnation, about the significance of being born in a human body. Because as you all know, the ego makes everything so small and puny. It's horrible. It doesn't see all these things, right?